of raising money, and it's what's done with that money that's hugely important.
So is the value of that it is, you may have lots of hits and only get a few of those, but a direct debit is a long-term commitment that you can actually do something with.
If the charity, which both John and Wendy made the point about relationships, if the charity gets the relationship right, then it will be a long-term commitment, a direct debit.
And I just want to get a quick reaction to John's very interesting point that it really doesn't matter if people are upset. If the maths adds up at the end of the day, then so what?
It's about getting the balance right, and John expressed that much better than I could do. And but every charity needs to look at the way that it does the
But he
ask.
didn't really say it was about getting the balance right. He said it was if it worked financially, then do it, regardless of... I mean, are you saying the same thing, really? Because the balance to you is, does it get enough people to pay as measured against the number of people it annoys who won't give you any money?
But he also quite clearly expressed that the way that he was asked quite often was a positive experience and left him with a smile on his face, even if he didn't give.
OK, let's go to Lynn Potter in Hexham. Lynn, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Yes, tell me about your own story.
Well, my point is that my son died a few years ago in a prominent children's hospital, and since then I've been giving a direct debit to the hospital. But since then I've been inundated with requests from a wide variety of children's charities asking me for money. And naturally, it not just makes me cross, it makes me very upset.
And how do you think they're getting the information? How are they getting your name?
I can only assume that because I regularly donate to the hospital, that somehow it's got my name on a list somewhere.
And I guess your point would be, because you give for a very personal reason, it's even more offensive in a way to have the implication that you should give to all and sundry who come along with a vaguely similar cause.
That's right, yes. And it isn't enough just to know that these charities require the money. I've made my choice where I want to donate, and I don't want to feel blackmailed and feeling guilty and upset every time in the post on a weekly basis I get requests from other charities. And like the previous caller, I too have received all sorts of money and rehydrating salts and pens, etc., to try to persuade me to donate.
Just while Lynn is on, I'd like to go to Lindsay very quickly on this, because it's been raised now by two callers, is this whole business of names and addresses being passed around, as it were, from, the implication being from charity to charity. Does this happen?
Peter, yes, it does, and it's called reciprocal mailing. It's a standard practice, not just within charities, but within industry in general. And but many charities are now having another look and considering as to whether the benefits and values. And this is about charities needing to be a bit more sophisticated and clever, and we all appreciate this. And Lynn's example there is one where actually I entirely and utterly understand where she's coming from.
Because people ought to be given some kind of, as you are with post, you ought to be given the opportunity to say, I do not want my address passed on to. If I give money, I make the decision.
Absolutely, and where it's a very personal, close decision like Lynn's, I mean, my recommendation to Lynn is to go back to that hospital and to engage with them and say, look, I'm not happy with this. I'm a regular supporter of yours, and treat me better.
Yeah. Have you actually ever taxed them with it, Lynn? I guess I can see why you wouldn't want a confrontation with them particularly, but have you ever tried to find out how it actually happened?
No, I haven't. I have confronted one of the other charities that were sending me requests every week, and I rang them up and asked them to take my name off the list. But to do that, to pursue every charity,
sure,
is a time-consuming job.
Indeed. Thank you very much for your call. I want to go to Graham Newbrook in Newcastle under Lyme. Graham, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Yeah, what's the point you want to make?
Well, I wear two hats, really. I, obviously, as a citizen, I'm approached by charities, but I also am a centre manager for a charity. We have really gone a different route. We don't send out mass mailings and we don't shake boxes in the street. We've approached it from the point of view of approaching organisations, first of all, to check whether they wish to support charities, engaging them in a dialogue and telling them what our aims are. Then we apply for funding. And I would say...
So you moved away completely from approaching individuals. You're going for organisations.
We've never done that, because it isn't the way we feel it should be done. My take on charity generally is that if all charities in the UK ceased, I think it would seriously damage the infrastructure of the country. We are run largely by charities, which I think is a great pity. I would feel much more comfortable if the money was raised by government through whatever means, such as taxation and lottery, and is distributed out to the charities properly, because the charities do a very worthwhile job. If you consider things like cancer research and the Heart Foundation, they should not need to rely on public sympathy in the way that they do.
But is it part of that idea that, as you said, you think it should actually be run by government or lottery? But presumably if it is run by charities, part of the point you're making is that it ought to be professionally run.
Exactly. It has to be done professionally. I think it's already been mentioned that there's quite a lot of charity fatigue. There are any number of people wanting money from you. And the only way that your charity can react to that is to become more professional. It's absolutely necessary. And that is, in fact, what we have done.
OK, Graham, thank you very much indeed. We had an enormous number of emails long before this programme began. We've probably had more while it's been going on. Winifred has some of them.
Just a taster. Catherine Shaw wrote to say, we had our first roving charity fundraiser of the year at this house on Saturday. The streets of Bristol are saturated with them, and a decision seems to have been taken on this new tactic of haranguing people in their own homes. I'm happy with big issue sellers and Christian Aid Week volunteers, but the hard sell by people pretending to be the face of X or Y charity leaves me feeling not just uncharitable, but seriously wound up. And according to John, in Belfast, charities where individuals volunteer to give their time and effort gain more respect and trust than those who employ people to get other people's bank details on the street at £7 an hour with bonuses when you reach your targets. Ian Cole and his wife, though, work for charities, and Ian wrote to tell us that income generation is an important part of the work that charities do, and that although we may all object to begging letters coming through the post, they do get a response. Criana Bradshaw, we think that might be Corinna, but hastily typed anyway. She writes to say, I am discouraged from donating to any charity that sends me a horrid plastic, usually non-functional biro with the begging letter. When I make a donation, I want to feel that it's being spent on the object of the charity, not purchasing more cheap non-functional biros to be sent out to people who can presumably afford to buy a biro for themselves. And that's it.
Thank you very much, Winifred. And points I'm sure that Lindsay wants to pick up. But let me go to another caller first. Alexander Gravenstein is calling. Alexander, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Yeah, what's the point you wanted to make?
The point, what I like to make, I believe, or we believe, I am the project organizer of a charity, that collectors who are approaching the public shouldn't be paid at all. It should be voluntary. I think it's unethical. Secondly, sending pens out and sending boxes out to individuals to collect from friends, that is even worse, that create to defrauding the public. I mean, people collecting in pots what is sent out from a charity, and then they don't pass it on. So that is not right.
Can I take you back to your first point, which was the business of people collecting in the street? Isn't it reasonable if you want to get a lot of people out there to get a lot of money? If you there may be
so
young...
long as it is done in a professional manner, and.
But if you want it done professionally, don't you have to pay them?
Yeah, but I think it's like a job creation scheme. Yeah, for money what is paid from agencies. Agencies employ collectors, and then they are sending them onto the streets with clipboards or whatever. not many pennies goes to the charity from that money, for sure. Some charities say that's better than nothing, but I believe it shouldn't be done that way at all, and it shouldn't be passed on. Our charity, we don't pass on addresses from our donors to other charities.
Let me put that to Lindsay, the idea that, it's almost an industry, this business of collecting in the street, and that not enough money actually goes back to the organisations.
Peter, quite a few callers have raised this issue of what is direct debit, committed giving fundraising happening via the street. First of all, the key point to make is that hundreds of millions of pounds have been raised in the last few years from new donors who are principally young people. This is a technique where we've gone out, or the sector has gone out and has spoken to young people and said, how do you feel you want to be engaged with? And we've responded to that. Now, the average charity donor, and I apologise to everybody for generalising this, but is a 55-year-old housewife. And what we're trying to do is broaden out those who support on a committed way. And so if charities turn round and explain to their supporters and donors, what we're trying to do is get young people to share the burden of supporting you. Then suddenly this sophisticated, complex form of fundraising, because you need to be able to explain and be able to take banking details and direct debit details, which does require staff who have a high degree of training, and it's a high degree of commitment. It's a tough job.
Can I bring in Ben Lloyd, because this is the very subject that he's called about, really. Ben, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, hello.
Hi, what's your... You've heard what Lindsay had to say and what some of our other callers have said.
Well, it was really about the cost of fundraising. I used to work for a large children's charity for a number of years. I don't anymore. I did become slightly disillusioned with the costs involved in raising money for charities, although obviously it's very important. Particularly with the face-to-face fundraising, the fundraising on the street, I think what Lindsay's just been saying sounds quite right, but at the same time, people who are stopped in the street don't really realise the industry that's sitting behind it, namely that there's just a few suppliers, private companies, who recruit the fundraisers, who train the fundraisers, who give them a bib with the charity's name on, and they go and try and stop you. And you.
But it's still your decision whether you support one charity or another.
Yes, but that's not the point I want to make. Really, is that what tends to happen with people who are stopped in the street is that the attrition rate, i.e. the number of months they give for before they stop their direct debit, is quite small. There's a huge attrition rate after 6 months, for example.
So they drop out?
They drop out, they stop giving. Now, the amount of money that the charity has to pay the private company for recruiting that donor is, well, it could be as much as a year's worth of contributions. And I think it's just, I'm all for giving to charity, and I think face-to-face fundraising has raised, obviously, a lot of money, but I don't think there's enough awareness of people who are stopped in the street. I think they're quite naive as to where the money's going.
Can I put this? I want to put this to Lindsay Boswell. Is it value for money?
Peter, Ben makes some very interesting points. I think some of his information is slightly out of date. The contracts that most charities have with these agencies, and incidentally, some of these agencies are actually owned by a number of charities getting together. The contracts that they have prevent the agencies making too much money out of those who don't commit on a long-term basis.
Sorry, can I get one more caller in, because we're quite pushed for time, which is Ian James in Nottingham. Ian?
Hello there, Peter.
Good afternoon. What was your point?
Well, a lot of your callers have raised very good points, but perhaps charities are having to adopt these more sort of commercially inspired activities to raise money, and of course they need the money to keep going. Because perhaps people's genuine compassion and generosity is less than perhaps it has been in the past. I know there's been a huge response to the tsunami appeal.
That was what I was just about to say to you, yeah, which rather argues against that. So.
But that was a dramatic one-off event, really pulling at the emotional heart, the heartstrings of people, and they give a one-off emotional response. But of course, as many of other speakers have said, what charities really need is committed, ongoing giving to keep their activities going. And it's this that charities are perhaps finding it harder and harder to get.
Okay, just with the small time we've got left, I think I'd rather cut across you there, Lindsay, and this point stayed on this point, which is, are you actually desperately trying to make up for a slight bit of charity fatigue that's going on?
Charities aren't desperate at all. Charities are trying to work in a real long-term relationship-building way. We've got a phenomenal range of tax incentives that currently exist. Gift aid, which has had a marvellous boost in profile as a result of the tsunami appeal, makes a major difference. But the key point, and thank you for your programme for doing it, is that charities need to educate and engage more with donors and supporters about the realities of the way that they work.
I think we've done that today, and thank you for all of you who called. Winfried.
That's it for today. On the programme tomorrow, if you buy a DVD from America, then the chances are it won't play in the DVD machine that you bought here in the UK, and that's because DVDs are coded according to region. But by getting a series of codes off the internet and putting them into your DVD player using the remote control, you can, in many instances, make it play DVDs from anywhere in the world. So why are the manufacturers so reluctant to tell everyone about it? Join us tomorrow, 12:04.
You and Yours was presented by Winfried Robinson and Peter White. The producer was Will Yates. Now time for a look at the weather forecast with Alex Deakin.
Thank you very much, Caroline. Good afternoon. I know it's not shining everywhere, but if you've got the sunshine at the moment, it really does feel like spring out there. Temperatures are more akin to early April. It's hard to believe that it is only the 1st of February. However, winter has not done with us just yet. It is going to turn colder again at the weekend with the return of nighttime frosts. Until then, however, the mild conditions will prevail, at least for the rest of this working week. Let's put some detail then on the forecast for today, tonight and tomorrow. I'll start with all of England, Wales and all of Scotland, except the Highlands, the Northern and the Western Isles. As I said at the start, it's not sunny everywhere, but if it is with you at the moment, it'll probably stay that way for the rest of today. There is thicker cloud affecting western fringes of Wales and Cornwall, and inland across England and Wales there is some cloud around, but that is tending to break up, and I think most of us actually will see some sunshine before the end of the day. It is a mild day, as I say, 10 Celsius for most, that's 50 Fahrenheit. We had a colder start across East Anglia, so maybe no